Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're zeroing in on micropayments and the Bitcoin Lightning Network. It's 2025 now, and we're asking, is this layer two solution, the one built on Bitcoin, actually delivering on that promise of instant, basically free, small payments?
Exactly. And if you're someone looking to, well, really get a handle on where this potentially game-changing tech is right now without getting totally bogged down in technical jargon, then yeah, you're in the right place.
Good.
We've gone through a bunch of articles, different viewpoints, trying to pull out the key nuggets about the state of Lightning micropayments today.
Okay, so just quickly, the Lightning Network, it's supposed to make Bitcoin faster, cheaper, especially for those small, everyday kind of transactions.
Right. Think of Bitcoin's main network, the blockchain, like maybe a big highway. It's secure but can get congested, expensive.
Okay.
Lightning adds these faster side streets. Smaller payments can zip around on these side streets without clogging the main highway for every single tiny transaction.
So you open a channel, do a bunch of transactions off-chain, then settle up later on the main chain, kind of like a bar tab.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, like a bar tab. And the huge idea behind it was unlocking these micropayments, things that just weren't feasible with on-chain Bitcoin fees.
Got it. So that's the core idea. And our mission today is to figure out, well, what's the reality of these Lightning micropayments here in 2025?
Precisely. We need to look at what's actually working, the successes, but also be really honest about the hurdles that are still holding it back.
Okay, let's start with the dream then. Rewind a bit. What was that initial promise? What got everyone so excited about Lightning and micropayments?
Oh, the potential seemed enormous. First off, instant settlement. Your payment is confirmed almost immediately. None of that waiting for blockchain confirmation.
Okay, speed.
Speed, yeah. And then the fees near zero. We're
Yeah.
talking fractions of a cent, theoretically. That alone opens up completely new economic models.
Right, things you just couldn't do before.
Exactly. Plus, massive scalability.
Mhm.
The network was designed to handle, potentially millions of transactions per second, way beyond the Bitcoin base layer. And, crucially, it aimed to inherit Bitcoin's censorship resistance.
Right.
So payments free from intermediaries trying to block them.
So it wasn't just about slightly better Bitcoin payments. It was like enabling whole new ways to interact online.
That was the vision, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about paying, say, 5 cents for one news article instead of hitting a paywall or needing a full subscription.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Or streaming video and paying like per second or per minute. It pointed towards ways to monetize digital stuff without relying solely on ads everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
People even talked about the Internet of Things, your smart fridge ordering milk with tiny automatic payments. It was all part of this grand vision for Internet money, truly native digital cash.
Okay, the dream sounds good. Let's crash back to 2025. Where are we actually seeing Lightning make inroads with small payments? What's working?
Well, there are definitely pockets of real traction. One of the most visible is probably content microtipping, especially in podcasting.
Ah, the value for value model.
Exactly. Platforms like Fountain, Breeze, Podverse, they've really pushed this. Listeners can stream sats, tiny fractions of Bitcoin, directly to podcasters while they listen.
So you're rewarding them in real time.
Pretty much. Or they can send these one-off tips. They call them boosts or zaps, little bursts of appreciation.
And this isn't just a tiny experiment anymore, right? I remember reading some top podcasters are actually earning like a significant chunk of their income this way.
Yeah, I've seen figures like 30, even 40% for some. That's definitely not insignificant.
Yeah.
It shows a real demand for this kind of direct support.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Gaming is another interesting area. You've got companies like THNDR Games distributing millions of sats as like in-game rewards.
Okay.
And Zebedee provides tools, an SDK, for developers to build Bitcoin rewards into games. Even big ones like CSGO, apparently, and lots of casual mobile games, too.
How does that work with the fee thing? Are the rewards tiny?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
But the key there is aggregation. The platforms often handle bundling lots of small payouts, which helps kind of smooth over some of the per transaction friction we can talk about later.
Makes sense. Batching things up. What else is gaining traction?
API monetization is starting to bubble up. Services, Lightspark, and Lightning Loop are examples. Allow developers to charge per API call using Lightning.
Instead of a flat monthly subscription.
Exactly. It can be much cheaper if you only need occasional access. We've also seen it used for cross-border payments, remittances. El Salvador is the famous example there, though results are maybe mixed.
Right, the Chivo wallet and all that.
Yeah. And just general tipping for online content continues. Podcasting 2.0 is big, but also platforms like Nostr, Fountain, Stacker News, people tipping 100 sats, which is tiny, just to say thanks or good point.
Mm.
And even some instant merchant payments are happening, often using those easier custodial wallets like Chivo.
Okay, so definitely some real-world use cases emerging, bright spots. But as you hinted, it's not all smooth sailing. Our sources definitely pointed to some persistent challenges. What's holding back wider adoption in 2025?
Right. I think the biggest one consistently mentioned is liquidity management. It's, well, it's complicated.
What is that on exactly about?
Liquidity.
So for your payment to get from you to someone else across the network, it has to route through intermediate nodes, right? Each node in the path needs to have enough Bitcoin on their side of the channel facing the direction your payment is going. That's outbound liquidity.
Okay.
Ensuring there's enough of that everywhere, all the time, especially for potentially millions of tiny payments flying around. That's a tough coordination problem. It often needs active management by node runners, or you rely on third-party services to help manage it for you.
So it's not quite as simple as just, loading up a Lightning wallet with Bitcoin and assuming any small payment will just work. Not always, no. It might fail if it can't find a path with enough liquidity.
Right.
And that leads into the next big challenge, user experience or UX.
Still too complicated for regular folks.
It's getting better. Definitely better than it was. But yeah, setting up a wallet, understanding concepts like channels, routing, knowing the difference between custodial and non-custodial.
Non-custodial meaning you hold your own keys. Custodial meaning someone else does.
Exactly. Non-custodial is the Bitcoin ideal, your keys, your coins. But it's often more complex to manage. Custodial is easier, more like a regular app, but you're trusting that provider. Most people just want payments to work. They don't necessarily want a lesson in channel management.
And that reliance on easier custodial options that has knock-on effects, right?
Yeah.
Undermines the whole decentralization idea.
It certainly can, yeah. If everyone uses a few big custodial providers, you start to reintroduce central points of failure or control. It's a trade-off between convenience and the core principles of Bitcoin, like sovereignty and censorship resistance. You really need non-custodial for that.
So it feels like Lightning is proving useful in these specific areas, like the podcasting and gaming you mentioned, but maybe hasn't broken through for general, everyday microspending.
That seems like a fair summary for now. And a lot of that comes back to those channel liquidity issues we touched on. It's not just about sending payments. It's about receiving them, too.
Ah, right. You need someone to have liquidity pointing towards you.
Precisely. That's inbound liquidity. To get that, someone has to lock up Bitcoin in a channel connected to you. And you also have to lock up capital to open channels initially. Then you have the technical challenge of keeping channels balanced so you can actually both send and receive effectively.
Sounds like a bit of a juggling act.
It can be. And imagine receiving, say, thousands of tiny tips. That can actually use up your inbound capacity quite quickly, meaning you can't receive any more until the channel is rebalanced somehow.
Can you fix that?
There are ways. Services like Lightning Pool let you essentially buy or rent inbound liquidity from others.
Yeah.
But again, that adds complexity and it adds cost, which kind of nibbles away at that near zero fee promise for the really small stuff.
Okay, so speaking of phase, the theory was like 1 Satoshi, fraction of a cent payments. Is that actually practical?
Well, yes and no. While the base Lightning protocol allows for tiny amounts, there are practical economic floors. Routing nodes still charge very small fees, but they aren't zero.
Okay.
So for a payment to be worth routing, it probably needs to be above, say, 10 Satoshis, maybe even 100 sats in some cases, depending on the route. Which is still tiny, yes, but it means true nano payments like 1/10 of a cent are still difficult outside maybe closed-loop systems.
And what about the cost of opening and closing those channels on the main Bitcoin network? That still costs something, right?
It does, and those Bitcoin network fees can fluctuate wildly sometimes. If fees are high, it makes opening lots of small channels or frequently rebalancing them on-chain pretty uneconomical.
So beyond the setup and the liquidity, are there other UX things that feel clunky?
Yeah, definitely. The whole invoice system generating a QR code or that long string of text, then the sender has to scan it or copy paste it. It doesn't feel as smooth as just tapping a card or phone.
Right, more steps involved.
And payment failures. They happen. Sometimes there's just no route with enough liquidity, or maybe there's temporary network congestion. But the error messages users get, like that infamous no route found, aren't always very helpful. It's frustrating if you don't know why it failed.
And reliability isn't just an issue for tiny payments, is it? Even medium-sized ones can fail sometimes.
That's true. Finding a reliable path, especially for larger amounts that might need to be split across channels, can still be a challenge. Sometimes the way funds are balanced across the network can create these weird, temporary bottlenecks.
Hmm.
Plus, there's the whole channel management burden for non-custodial users deciding who to open channels with, how large, when to close them, keeping them balanced. It's a learning curve.
And that initial funding step often requires an on-chain Bitcoin transaction first, right? Which brings back those potential high fees.
Usually, yes. That first step to get Bitcoin into your Lightning wallet often involves an on-chain transaction.
It also sounds like both the sender and receiver kind of need to be online for a payment to happen.
Generally speaking, yes. That's different from, say, sending an email or even a regular bank transfer, where the recipient doesn't need to be actively online at that exact moment.
And are there concerns about the network structure itself, like becoming too centralized around big players?
There are ongoing discussions about that, definitely. Large, well-connected, well-funded nodes hubs naturally end up routing a lot of payments. That efficiency is good, but it raises questions about centralization risk over the long term.
And is it even profitable for someone small to run a routing node? The fees are tiny.
That's another valid concern. The economic viability for smaller node operators, given the minimal routing fees they earn versus the cost and effort of maintaining the node and managing liquidity, is something the community is still figuring out.
Okay, so lots of challenges still. But development hasn't stopped, has it? There's still a lot happening.
Oh, absolutely not. The ecosystem is incredibly active. There's a ton of ongoing work to address these very issues.
Like what? What's coming down the pipeline?
Well, one big one is splicing. This is a technique that lets you resize a channel, add or remove funds without actually closing and reopening it on the main blockchain.
Ah, so that avoids those on-chain fees for adjustments.
Exactly. It should make liquidity management much more flexible and cheaper. It's expected fairly soon, potentially alongside something called the Taro protocol.
Okay, cool. What else?
Bolt 12 is another major development. It aims to standardize things like invoices, making them reusable, and it adds native support for recurring payments.
Recurring payments. That sounds big for like Lightning-based subscriptions.
Huge potential there, yeah. Then you have more experimental things like Fediments and related eCash concepts, exploring community-based custody models using Lightning, often with enhanced privacy. We're also seeing wider adoption of dual-funded channels, where both parties contribute funds when opening a channel, making it easier to get started with both sending and receiving capacity.
So it's not just one person putting up all the initial Bitcoin.
Right. And of course, improvements on Bitcoin's base layer, like Taproot, which already happened, and maybe future proposals, continue to provide a stronger foundation for Lightning to build on. More efficiency, more possibilities.
What about making it easier to actually find channels with liquidity?
Yeah, work there too. Things like liquidity advertisements are emerging, basically. Marketplaces where nodes can signal they have capacity available for others to connect to.
So you can find good peers more easily.
Hopefully. And wallets are getting smarter. Features like turbo channels, where a wallet like Phoenix automatically opens a channel for you when you first receive funds, really smooth out the onboarding.
That sounds much better.
We also have atomic multipath payments, or AMP, which helps make larger payments more reliable by splitting them cleverly across multiple smaller paths. And just generally, wallets are getting much better at automating liquidity management and channel balancing behind the scenes.
Hiding the complexity.
That's the goal. There are even standards being developed for streaming money, continuous micropayments. And on a horizon, things like PTLCs, point-time locked contracts, promise potentially more private and efficient routing in the future.
Wow, okay. So a lot is happening on the development front. Let's circle back to the big picture then. The micropayment dream on Lightning, is it still alive? Still realistic?
You know, I think the perspective has shifted. It went from maybe a bit of a joke or a fantasy to something people see a real need for, especially with subscription fatigue and ad overload online.
People want alternatives.
They seem to. Now, Lightning probably isn't going to replace Visa or MasterCard for your coffee tomorrow. That's maybe not the right comparison.
Okay.
But as a parallel payment rail, one focused on speed, maybe more privacy, lower fees for certain things, more user control, that potential is definitely still there and arguably getting stronger.
So the key question is, are people building the apps that actually need these unique features?
That's exactly it. Does the world need apps that depend on instant, tiny, near-free payments? The tech is evolving, but it needs those compelling use cases to really take off.
And just briefly, how does Lightning fit with other Bitcoin scaling or feature additions we hear about, like Liquid or SegWit, Taproot? Are they related, competing?
They're mostly complementary parts of the broader Bitcoin evolution. Liquid is a sidechain, mainly for faster, more confidential trading between exchanges. SegWit was a core Bitcoin upgrade that, among other things, fixed issues that enabled Lightning to work better.
Oh,
And
okay.
Taproot was another core upgrade, enhancing privacy, efficiency, and smart contract capabilities on Bitcoin itself, which provides a better foundation for layers like Lightning. They all aim to improve Bitcoin, but often focus on slightly different problems or use cases.
Got it. So, looking forward, what are the absolute must-haves for Lightning micropayments to really break into the mainstream?
Okay, I'd say continued protocol improvements, especially for reliability of larger payments and even simpler channel management. We need much better abstraction in wallets, hide the messy bits,
Make it invisible to the user.
pretty much. Then, deeper integration. We need Lightning built into the platforms people already use, social media, e-commerce, content sites. That's crucial for exposure.
Makes sense.
And finally, probably some regulatory clarity wouldn't hurt, just to give businesses more confidence in adopting it.
So, summing up this deep dive for 2025, what's the headline? Revolution arrived. Or still loading.
Huh. I'd lean towards significant evolution, not quite revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're seeing clear success, but it's often in these specialized domains. Places where small payments get bundled or where Lightning solves a problem, traditional payments just can't, like that value-for-value podcasting model.
Okay. So the dream is alive, but it's facing these real-world hurdles, infrastructure, usability, just general understanding.
Exactly. But the key thing is, these hurdles seem solvable. There's a huge amount of brain power and effort being poured into fixing them. These aren't fundamental dead ends.
And the long view remains pretty compelling, doesn't it? If Bitcoin solidifies as that base settlement layer.
Then Lightning really could become its fast, nimble, almost frictionless cash layer on top for all sorts of transactions, big and, yes, maybe even truly micro.
The infrastructure, the protocols, they're maturing. It feels like now we're waiting to see which killer apps really grab hold of this power.
That's the stage we seem to be in. What applications will truly leverage instant, near-zero fee micropayments in a way that captures the imagination and the wallets of millions?
Definitely leaves us with something to think about. What kind of micropayment applications would you find compelling? Maybe worth exploring some of the projects building on Lightning right now. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.